Hey, so I want to talk about how you can access all of your chakras, including the ones that are above the solar plexus and the heart space, because these are the ones that are the hardest to access. And I did how to access the ones that are, um, your below the heart space and the inner child. I kind of consider that like a chakra, but it's not really. I'll talk more about that in a separate video because that'd be a lot of information. But in this video, I want to talk about the higher chakras and how you can actually access those, because I've seen people have a different idea of how to access these chakras, and I there's some truth to it, but at the same time, I feel like it's missing a very important aspect, and I'm going to be talking about that. And that aspect is that your chakras are something that you step into. Like, these are mind states that you step into. And it's not like when you meditate, you can just imagine it opening or whatever, and then you all of a sudden have access to it. It can work that way when you're meditating, but at the same time, if you want to have access to it all the time, keep in mind that your chakras are always open. Your chakras are always spinning and rotating. It's just that when you aren't paying attention and focusing in those spaces, then you're not accessing that mind state. It's just something that you're kind of using, but you're more tapped into other mind states. And the other mind states that we're usually tapped into is the ego mind, which is the solar plexus, and all of the ones below that. A lot of people are afraid to even tap into the heart chakra, which is the heart space, because they're looking at that inner child, which is a reflection of that ego, and they think that that's their emotions and that's where they stand, and really that's just a reflection of what the ego feels lack. So I kind of did talk about that in my last video. I'm gonna put the link in the description down below. But in order to actually access the higher chakras, you have to master those lower chakras, and mastering those lower chakras is not a big task. Like, you're mastering it every day. Like, you're mastering it by experiencing this 3D world that we're experiencing right now. And the problem is that people feel this lack, and this lack keeps them stuck in this lower the lower mentalities or the lower minds. And when you feel like you're not experiencing stuff, and you feel like you're not getting what you want out of life, and like your ego isn't getting fulfilled or whatever, then you're keeping yourself stuck with those lower chakras. So in order to feel fulfilled with what you already have, to rise above that, which I did talk about in my last video, it was kind of like a rant, but in order to rise above that, you have to start focusing on the heart space rather than the inner child. So as I explained, the inner child, it's a reflection of the ego. And what we tend to do is that we look at what we don't have as if we're looking at a reflection, and that would be considered our inner child. Like, the inner child feels like it didn't have those things, so now it's going to use the ego to obtain those things. But now, since we're trying to move above that, we're going to be focusing on how to get back to the self, which is the heart chakra. To do that, there's a level of honesty you have to have with yourself. So rather than thinking, oh, I have these lacks, all these things that I lack, and I didn't have these things growing up, and now I have to go and obtain those things, to regain that focus back to the self, you would think, like, it's because of my mentality. I think I have to go to these extents to get those things. I think I have to go to those extents because I feel lack, and the reason why I feel lack is because I don't like feeling vulnerable. There, you're actually getting somewhere. You're actually finding out why you maneuver the way you maneuver, but you're using that heart space. It takes a level of honesty and transparency with yourself. You have to, like, really look into yourself, and I consider that the subconscious mind, because a lot of the things that we feel are subconscious. So when you're in that space and you're trying to dive into why you are certain ways, you're going to probably you're going to come across like triggers. I think this happens like in the course of several days, weeks, months. Like, the realization and opening or realizing how to use all those chakras you don't just sit down one time and you did it. Like it's something that you step into, so it's going to take a while. And when you're stepping into that heart chakra, this is something that we're not used to doing. Like we're actually not used to doing this. Like when you think you know what love is, you realize that that's an inner child version of love. Like you thinking that you have to do things for people because you love them isn't always the case. Sometimes you're doing those things to receive some kind of validation. And that is a inner child aspect. That is not the heart chakra. The heart chakra does because it is being that. Like you are just in your heart space, and if you have the capacity to do something from your heart, then you do it anyway because you have the capacity. And this is what I'm talking about. Like you're stepping into it. The inner child will always want some kind of validation. And I can tell you now, I do all kinds of stuff. Like I've been doing stuff since like I was really young. I barely receive validation. Like I'm like a Leo moon, and the worst thing for me is to not receive validation, right? And I had to learn that I'm just not gonna get it. Like I have very few followers, and to be honest, as a Scorpio, I become afraid when I see a video that's like trending of mine. I put it on private because I have that internal battle within myself. But anyways, so when you're trying to do this kind of chakra opening or chakra I don't know if it's activating chakras. I think it's more just you're opening that space. But you're not doing this to receive any kind of validation. And this is the part where we all go wrong, because when you're in those lower chakras, like your ego, the ego really wants that validation. So does the inner child. Really, really wants it, but you have to be okay with not getting it. Okay? I've had to not forgive people, but I've had to move on without closure. I've had to walk away without saying the last word. I've had to just step away from arguments without winning. Like I've had to do all kinds of things for me to realize that if I had just tried to if I tried to receive that validation, if I had tried to get the last word in, or if I tried to feel important somehow, some way, I would be too focused on that ego space. I'd be fulfilling that and that inner child, that reflection that can't be fulfilled ever. And it's just it's pointless to try to put your energy there. So the heart space you'll always be able to receive energy in your heart space. Like when you do receive validation, it's not that it fulfills you, it's just that you already know that you are that. You know, if someone says, wow, you're amazing, you already know that you're amazing. You're not like, oh, wow, no one's ever called me amazing. I don't know how to take this. I'm gonna reject this. Like you don't want to mentally reject your capacity to have love. You don't want to reject your capacity to give love. You just want to accept that that's what you do anyway. Okay? And when you can work on that, not just with love, but with all emotions, like your heart space is all of your emotions, the things that make you upset, the things that make you feel frustrated, and the things that make you feel really, really sad that you have to work through, that we tend to reject because we don't like feeling really, really sad, because our egos don't like feeling sad. All those things, you have to find a way to work with it. You know, it's all a part of you. You know, you have to find a way to work with it. And you have to work with it by validating yourself. Like you validate your own emotions. When something's frustrating you, just go, wow, this is frustrating me. And then you look at it and you think about like, why is this frustrating me? For me, when I encounter like a trigger, my whole process is, okay, this just triggered me. What is this triggering? And then it brings me back to like that inner child. It for some reason loves to do that to me. Like it brings me back to the inner child. And I remember something like from when I was younger and I was rejected, or something happened, or I didn't receive attention, and I really look at it and I'm like, well, that's not where I'm at now, and it's okay that I feel triggered. Like that's just an aspect. But if I really want to work through this, all I have to think about is how I can kind of not just move past it, but how it is affecting me and what it could mean and what I could work on by moving forward from it. Not that I have to like fulfill something. It's just that, well, I acknowledge that that's there, but I can't do anything about that, you know, and then moving forward. So when you want to go to the other chakras, I'm actually going to recap to the little drawing I have, or the little Google thing that I took on Google. When you want to get to the next level of your heart space, you know, your heart space is probably going to take a while for you to like master. You know, you're going to have to find a way to master being transparent with yourself and honest all the time and not lying to yourself. This is when you get to that throat chakra. And that throat chakra, this is where it really starts happening for you, because you're creating your secondary etheric energy. I call this the etheric temple, the etheric template. This is where you start really creating that impression, that part of you that's going to broadcast itself in a sense, but not just in a lower nature kind of self. It's like the self that is able to speak that honesty now. You know, you were able to be honest with yourself. Now you can be honest with others. And people feel when you're being honest. Like you can lie to people, but you're going to remain stuck in the lower chakras, only using those spaces. And some people try to take the lower chakras and put it in their throat chakra, so they start telling lies. And this means that they're trying to like build the bridge between their heart and their what they communicate, their thoughts. Like they're building that bridge based off of like lower natures, and you don't want to do that if you're trying to activate these chakras in the energetic integrity in which they're meant to be expressed. Like these things have their own energy signatures. You know, they have their own integrity behind them, and you want to use them how they're meant to in order to really reap the full benefits of them, you know? So when it comes to the throat chakra, this is when you start speaking that truth and start embodying more of who you are by your impression. And the impressions that you make on people really determine like how people see you, you know? And it also determines how you see yourself and what you believe you're capable of, or the limitations that you're accepting of yourself and accepting of all your potentials. You know, you can just, it's like a step closer to your third eye. So it's like you're starting to really see how your transparency, like what kind of response your transparency will get you, like from having that ability to be vulnerable with people and vulnerable with yourself. You're now seeing like what that can get you, and you're not doing this to get something necessarily. You're not even doing this to get validation. You're not doing it to like attract people or to get anything. You're just doing this to get back in touch with yourself. And this is the whole point of opening your chakras. Like you're not doing it for anyone but yourself, and to get back in touch with yourself. Because the moment you're able to get back in touch with yourself, you feel that fulfillment. And it's not coming from anywhere else. It's just coming from you. And that's the best validation that you could ever receive from anything. So everything that you communicate, everything that you feel, the impressions, everything that you kind of give off with other people, even when you rub them the wrong way, comes from the throat chakra. And when you're using it correctly, you're able to use that energy from your heart and transfer it into how you express yourself, through your words, through your vibration, through the impression that you give to people. And then you're able to really relate with other people's impressions. And then you're able to really relate that and see if people are being vulnerable with you, or if they're holding back and they're putting up energetic walls. So I'm going to get to the third eye, because it kind of just blends in at that point, right? Like when you get to your third eye, when you're able to really see if other people are reciprocating, this is when you're able to find things that align with you and bring that towards you. And there's no amount of speed or there's no amount of like attention that you'll get from doing this. It's just based off of like alignment and what else is on that frequency, you know, for you to gravitate towards it, or for those things to gravitate towards you. You're just able to see what is in alignment with what you are embodying now, like the energy that you're tuned into, and all that space that you're now using. Who is in alignment with that? What's in alignment with that? And then you're also able to see how it's changing you. And kind of, when you get to this point, you kind of can't go back. It's really hard to go back to being an egotistical person. And we do need our egos. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love having an ego, because if I didn't have one, I wouldn't even care to make this video, right? But the fact that we have egos, it allows us to have this like this individuality and this ability to like not just connect with people, but to express ourselves. So you do want to keep in touch with those lower chakras, but the main focus is not to get caught up in that, because you're actually already mastering that. You're already mastering your ego. You're going to, until we die here, to be very honest. And it takes a certain level of honesty with yourself to get out of being in your ego, because your ego can live in a lie. Like, you can keep lying to yourself, and your ego will try to sustain itself within that lie for as long as it can. But when you get towards the throat chakra, the heart chakra, throat chakra, and the third eye, it's really hard to live a lie. It's really hard to lie to others, and it's really hard to accept other people that lie. So that's what makes this whole process like more painful, or not even painful, but just people that don't want to reach that space where there's no lies, no BS. They won't even try. Like, and that's what makes it so that you can see right through these people. It's like you're on a certain frequency, or you're seeing things from a certain frequency, and other people aren't able to be on that same frequency as you. But it's not that you're looking down on them, because if you're looking down at people, you're in your ego. It's not that. You're just looking at things like, okay, well, I can see where you're at, you know? If you do look down on people, then it's not like you're looking down at people. It's just that you know where people are at. Okay, and some people appear to not have it like together mentally. When I say mentally, I just mean they are kind of they prioritize certain things that don't serve their best interests or their highest good, whatever that is, right? Good can be anything to anyone, but when you're in that space where you're able to see what all of that means to you, it's because you have all your morals together. Like you've taken the time, not just opening your chakras, but you've assorted those morals, like what those morals are going to look like. If honesty, transparency, and vulnerability is within that morality system that is linked to your heart chakra, then you're going to be mastering those things. And it looks different for everyone. Everyone's going to have a different way of doing this. If my way of communicating, or my impression, is to just tell you the truth, or to if I'm not feeling it, then I'm just not feeling it, and that's just how it is. I'm going to do it anyway. Or I'm not feeling it, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say I'll think about it. Whatever it takes for me to be able to communicate that, that's a part of my moral system. You know what I mean? To get this going is how I construct that moral system. And if I want to use my third eye to see things, then I construct that moral system in order to see through other people's BS, or to see through my own BS, to call myself out and to catch myself, and to not play a role, like I'm a character, but to step into who I actually am and just to be that, okay? So the next one, after you've, worked on your third eye, and I do recommend that you sort out what your moral systems are, like what your core values are, because if you don't do that, then you're probably going to be stuck in that inner child loop, where you can't get past the ego, the inner child, and the subconscious. You're just in this like triangle loop, okay, where you're focused on like the ego and its reflection, how it appears to other people, how other people see it, if other people approve. It's just that's just a loop that you really don't want to be in. When you go to your crown chakra, finally, when you're ready to expand this is when you start using everything, like all the moral systems that you've now created space to have within your mind, and all the things that you're trying to incorporate now. You're putting that into action. You're making that a part of who you are. Now when people meet you, you're not like iffy, wishy-washy. You're not trying to hide stuff like, oh, I'm doing this, but I'm not doing it. I'm kind of doing it. Like you're able to just like explain it that way. Like, yeah, I started this, but this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm into. This is how it feels to me. This is how I look at that. And it just is. It just is. And it's just being. And you're just being that. Okay? Like you're not trying to give off a facade or a front that you're more of something than you're not. You are just being. And that's the main reason why you want to somehow find your own way of reaching these different spaces, or to use these different spaces. Like we all have these spaces to function in a greater way, but we don't always think of how to use those spaces. Think of like your moral systems, whatever you decide to incorporate, as like renovating your house. What is important to you to have in this house? Like, do you want a room that is sunny and you can meditate in, so then you can start focusing on like what kind of illusions you've been lost in and how to clear all that up? Do you want a room in your house where you can have a vulnerable, safe space to feel your emotions, because other people don't understand? Do you want a safe space where you can communicate and sing and be the person that you want to be, and it doesn't really matter what kind of impression you have on other people, because all it matters is the impression on yourself? Then you put that in that moral system and you renovate that house to fit your core values, okay? So that's how you actually access all those chakras. You can sit and try to meditate on it, but when you meditate on it, what you're doing is that you're looking at your moral system. I don't recommend trying to open your chakras and meditate, because that's not actually it's not going to happen that way. Your chakras are always going. And also, I encourage you to look at where you may be blocked, because each of these chakras is connected to like an energy body, and your energy bodies are moving in these different dimensions. Like these are different dimensions of you. And when you're experiencing a block, like let's say your emotional body is blocked, like your heart, you can't use your heart chakra that much. Like you feel restricted from expressing your emotions, or to feel your emotions, or you're maybe experiencing some kind of cognitive dissonance in some sense. So your energy body, whatever energy body that is, will either feel like restricted from expressing itself. So then you will somehow, some way feel like you're bottling something up. And this is like an energetic alarm going off that your body isn't moving freely. Your body isn't able to freely express itself in its dimension. So it is either bottling stuff up, or it may be feeling like it has so much that it's trying to let off. Like let's say something made you really angry. Your emotional body may want to like throw something, you know what I mean? Like, or you may want to throw something because your physical body, you feel that, you kind of take on the characteristics of these energy bodies. You may want to express that exaggerated attitude, but you can always trace back to like, why is this triggering me? Or why do I feel this way? And you want to start with, how can I see this from a higher observational perspective right now? Like, how can I tap into the chakra above it, instead of embodying that emotion and being enraged and sinking into that lower nature? How can I not evaluate it? Like, I don't want to make it so then your feelings aren't valid, but you want to be able to see things from a perspective where you don't start looking in the reflection and thinking about why or how this is happening to you because you're a horrible person. You know what I mean? You don't want to start looking in that reflection. You just want to trace it back to the self. Like, that reminds me of this. That's probably why I feel this way right now. that reminds me of this memory specifically. That's probably why I'm really guarded and I'm having issues with my trust. And then when you do that, you're just tracing it back to the self, and you can just resolve it in the sense where you're just like, well, I'm not trying to have trust issues because that's not going to serve me, you know. That happened, but if it's going to result in me closing my heart and being untrusting towards people, then that's not going to get me the result I want. And after you do that, you're just like, well, then I don't have to hold on to that. Like, it's like I can experience this emotion for however long I need to. I can cry, I can get mad, I can start expressing how I feel, whether it be through art, whether you exercise, whether you do some kind of activity to get it off your chest or get it out of your energy field. I encourage that, because when you have energetic blocks that come in and they try to and these energetic blocks take you off of your spiritual path, or just keep you from your spirit expressing itself, you're able to dissolve it based on just from either raising your vibration, expressing yourself, doing some kind of exercise, doing some kind of activity, or not caring about what people think. You're gonna do it anyway. As long as you are keeping in mind how karma works, and you're not doing something where it'll come back around, I think it'll be perfectly fine for you to do whatever it takes to get it off your chest. And you don't want it to harm yourself in the end, because it has to trace back to yourself, And I think that's why a lot of people either get into smoking cigarettes, or they'll get into numbing themselves in some way, because there's that reflection that they're looking at. But it's they are a part of the self, but they're looking at the reflection, and they think that if they drink this, then the self will they don't have to then look at the self. It's almost like you become numb to everything. You become numb to the whole scope of everything that is happening, and you don't have to look back at the self. But you do want to look at the self, because you are the self, okay? You don't want to not look at the self. So the heart space is the self. The inner child is a reflection of the ego. When I put it that way, I really hope that helps someone, because that's the loop that we get caught in. So we're gonna go over this one more time before I end this. So the heart space is your feelings, your emotions, how you feel things. And sometimes we don't look at this space because we're looking at the reflection. We're looking at the inner child. We think that we have to fulfill the inner child. The inner child is that part of you where you're looking in the, let's say you're looking in the mirror and you're just like, oh, my skin isn't clear. I don't feel beautiful. And I feel lame. I don't fit in. People don't like me. You're looking in that reflection. That's an inner child saying, or you're trapped in that loop now, okay? But when you look away from the mirror and you decide, you know what, I feel valid for feeling that way, because that rejection happened, but instead of putting all that pressure on me, I just have to figure out why that made me feel that way to begin with. And then it'll probably come back to a memory where where you were younger, and that time that thing happened and whatever. So you'll be able to sort through that, and you're just like, oh, well, that's not happening now. That's my reflection trying to get me to look at it, so then I can work on something, to try to improve myself. And after you've acknowledged that part of you, by being honest, by being transparent with yourself, you open that throat chakra, because you're able to give yourself the compassion you need. You're able to adjust how you speak to yourself, but also how you view yourself. But the impression that you have of yourself can change, because you're just well, I'm just sensitive, I guess. I am more emotional than I give myself credit for, and I guess I have some kind of wounding that I accept that it happened, and it's okay. It doesn't make me that forever. I'm just working on that right now. And by being that impression, people can feel your level of honesty, and then that makes it so that now you can see things for what they really are. Now you're oh man, I used to think I was so ugly back then, and I'm realizing that it was just my ego wanting to continuously work on something, because it just seemed like the whole mentality that I had was in lack, and it felt like it wasn't good enough, and I was just caught between looking at that reflection, you know. But now I can see that that's where I was, and that's not who I am now, and that's not what I am going to attract starting now. And then that makes you the creator of that. Now you can start creating your reality to fit that. You start feeling like you are that, and you can confidently maneuver through life being what you want to see. You know, you be what you want to see, and then you create that, whether it be from nothing, whether it be from something. Like, you have to be able to see that you are these things without validation, without money, without friends, without people telling you, without any kind of validation. Okay, like you want to be able to feel that within, to feel like, you know, I have full control over my destiny. I have full control over what I choose and don't choose to do. And if other people come into my space, I can see through their bullshit, or I can see them for who they are. Even if they're trying to get me into that lower nature, I can see that. And when you get there, that's when you finally you're using all that space, and there's unlimited space within all these spaces. So you can add whatever moral systems, whatever, you can even take out moral systems that you don't want. You know, that's when you're reprogramming stuff. You know, you can take out all those programs that didn't serve you before and put in new programs to serve you moving forward. So I hope you like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.